I received a message the other day and I wanted to do a whole video on this because I know that this would not just help this individual out, but so many other people. And the message basically read something along the lines of, I've been using Mounjaro to help with my sugar cravings, but I'm scared to come off. Any tips? And I am very passionate about the whole Mounjaro, Ozempic, GLP-1 use and using them in the correct way. Now, unlike most fitness coaches, I am not they are terrible, they are the devil. And I'm also not like they're the best things in sliced bread. I'm very much in the middle. But what I am for is if you are going to use them, using them in the best way so that you don't have this thing of coming off them and regaining the weight like lots of people are. So this is exactly what I'm going to cover in today's episode, is how you can, if you choose to use a GLP-1, Mounjaro, Ozempic, etc., utilize it best so that when you do make that choice to come off it, you can sustain the results or keep the results going. And also to help you decide, especially if you do have ADHD, if it's actually going to be a good thing for you or if it's actually going to cause more problems. As always, thank you for being here. And if you do find these videos valuable, helpful, make sure you leave a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and just make sure you are subscribed on whatever channel you are on because it very much helps me out. Let's get stuck the hell in. Now, before we start, I am going to address the elephant in the room, aka me wearing this very, very oversized fluffy thing. It is actually from Morrison's. If you're in the UK, you'll know that that's a supermarket. It is the most comfy thing ever because in the UK right now, it is extremely cold. I think when I checked the weather today, it says it feels about -3. So I'm wrapping up warm, okay? Yes, it doesn't look like the most professional thing, but hey, we keep it real on this channel. Okay, off on a tangent, let's get back to what we were chatting about. So the first thing I want to say is this is not me telling you what to do. I do not want you to think this video is me saying this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. I want you to take the information from today to go and make the best informed decision for yourself. I do not like when fitness coaches, people in the wellness space share and impose their opinion to make you feel like that's what you should do, which unfortunately a lot of people do. I'm very much more in the bracket of, hey, here's the facts, here's the science, here's what we know. You go and do with that what you want. So the first thing to understand is why is it that maybe a lot of people with ADHD are magnetized to utilizing these drugs? Why is it that they are potentially beneficial? So with ADHD, there is a lot of dysregulation, right? Decision fatigue, planning, organization issues, but also the big one when it comes to ADHD and food is the dopamine seeking, right? Food is something that can provide a big hit of dopamine to bring us back to that normal level of dopamine. So if you think an ADHD brain is always deficient, lower levels of baseline dopamine, and then food is something that can bring us back up. And that's where we can get this constant food noise, right? And that's a big thing that's spoken about when it comes to GLP-1s, that constant thought about food. And it's not that ADHDers are necessarily thinking about the food, it's that they're thinking of what can I do to get my dopamine up, and if you've used food to do that, that's why it's thinking about food. Also, the constant feeling of making decisions around food, that can drive up food noise, especially if you are trying to achieve something within that. So obviously weight loss, you're trying to make decisions based that are going to help you to lose weight, and that can cause a lot of overwhelm. With ADHD, things that feel simpler are much more attractive because there is so much chaos going on in our brain. If something can be easy, something can take away a lot of the thinking, the planning, the organization, which is something hard with ADHD, they're going to be more magnetized to it. And that's generally why ADHDers are quite heavily drawn to quick fixes or things that sound really, really simple or easy. Even if you know in your gut it's probably not going to be the best thing, we want simplicity, we want ease, we want convenience. I mean, everyone does in today's society, but ADHD specifically because our brains really struggle with that. So if you can take this injection, which basically removes a lot of the struggles when it comes to food because you're going to be so full that you can't really overeat. You're not going to be thinking about food as much. That seems, without having to do a lot of the sort of the deeper work to remove the food noise, etc., that feels so desirable, and that's completely understandable. It can feel almost euphoric. And when you are struggling with things like, food noise and emotional eating and feeling out of control with food, it comes with a lot of shame, it comes with a lot of anxiety, it comes with a lot of guilt, it comes with a lot of frustration, especially if you've been in these loops for years. So to have something that acts as the solution to that, well, of course it feels magnetic, of course it feels amazing, so it's completely understandable as to why ADHDers are magnetized to it. And obviously it can be very, very beneficial, right? It can, when used right, but where utilizing a GLP-1 can go very wrong with an ADHD brain is, number one, it can really disconnect you even further from hunger and fullness signals, because you're just, you know, with a GLP-1 Mounjaro, it takes away that feeling of hunger or very much suppresses it. And with ADHD, we have usually issues with introspection, so being able to pick up on those signals and read them correctly. So if you're already quite dysregulated when it comes to understanding your hunger and fullness, that's going to dysregulate you even more. Thus, when you come off it, it's going to be like really hard to struggle and register when am I truly hungry, when am I full, which is then going to lead to cycles of overeating or restriction. There's a big one of mistaking this appetite suppression of like, I'm healing my relationship with food, I'm in control, but it's kind of like a false sense of it. I like to think of it a bit like if you are, let's say you've got a broken leg and you're just taking really strong painkillers and then you're cracking on and saying, oh, I'm fine, everything's good. But then you come off the painkillers and the leg's still broken and then the pain comes back. That's kind of what you're doing. Like, being in control with food doesn't come from just like suppressing your appetite and restricting everything. It's kind of like this false sense of control. And then obviously when you come off it, back to square one, and then obviously you're in an even deeper shame loop cycle. It's problematic when you're utilizing it as like a control technique. You know, this is where it can become quite disordered of like, right, everything in my life feels really chaotic, out of control. This is something I can control. But obviously then it becomes a dependence of like, well, then I need this drug to feel in control of my life, which is not good. And probably the biggest one is just using it for that ease and convenience, not making any changes to your mindset to food, your habits with food. So obviously, yeah, you could probably and will get great results when being on it, but nothing's really changed. Again, if we think about that analogy of the broken leg, the leg isn't actually fixed, right? So when you come off it, all of those issues that probably put you into that state of being in a body that you weren't happy with, being overweight, etc., realistically are still there. And that's where we can fall into this trap of, you know, people start the drug, get great results, come off it, things start to go back to where they were, and then that's where we're in this, you know, potential dependence of it for the rest of your life, which is not where we want to be. You know, they're not cheap drugs, and plus they're not designed for long-term use at all. And some signs that I see that are kind of like red flags that you're using it for reasons where maybe it's starting to reach the realms of disordered eating, because this is something that I have talked about quite openly on social media and I've had backlash from it, but I'm not afraid to talk about it, because coming from an eating disorder and disordered eating background, they are horrible things to live with, and everyone deserves to live in a brain that has a really healthy relationship with food, because it can be so crippling. Because it's not like, you know, like with like alcohol addiction, drug addiction, you can remove that from your life and crack on with life, but food is always going to be a part of your life. So being able to have a positive relationship with it is so important. Like, I cannot emphasize it enough. And obviously disordered eating disorders can completely ruin lives, right? It can obviously kill people. It can lead to poor mental health, poor self-worth. It can really, really be a problem for living a happy, healthy life. So some signs that I see that are like, actually, you know what, maybe you're not in a healthy space to use this, it's starting to become a bit disordered, is like I've seen people literally stressing and panicking and having like, not like a little bit on edge, but like full on anxiety panics when they miss a dose, they can't get access to it, etc. It almost is like a drug addiction to it. Fear of eating without it, like how the hell am I going to cope? What am I going to do? Like that sort of level of anxiety. And almost getting like a high from the suppressions, like almost like this sense of morality, like it's not healthy. So it's just some things to be aware of. The kind of little red flags, if you're noticing those kind of trains and patterns, I'm not saying everyone that's in that boat is, but that's signs where it's starting to come disordered. But like I said, I'm not completely against it. When used in the right way, GLP-1 Mounjaro Ozempic could be very, very good for someone with ADHD for weight loss, because it can create breathing space, right? An ADHD brain is very chaotic and very busy. And if you just don't have the space to think about like habits and behaviors, because food is so heavy on your brain, and that sort of like calmness can help with that. And some people have reported that using them has potentially, you know, created a bit of calm, because it's taken so much pressure and stress off them, which has kind of had this domino effect. So if you just almost don't feel like you've got the capacity because the food noise is so crazy and loud and mental and everything's chaotic, well, maybe it can give you some breathing space to actually work on those habits and behaviors that lead to longevity. It can potentially help you to bring in the habits and behaviors to remove that impulsivity, because if impulsivity with food is one of your biggest struggles and you introduce that drug, and then you can start to work on these little methods like pausing before eating and these little tools and techniques that I teach my clients. Well, if that can help you to actually implement those, then you can use them long term, which is going to support the impulsivity. It can help to break cycles of shame and self-belief if, you know, for the first time ever, you're actually starting to see consistent results and it's building that self-belief that you can actually do this. That's invaluable, because self-belief and confidence that you can achieve the result is one of the biggest determinators, is that a word? of success in weight loss. You know, it's the first module that I teach inside my Wire to Thrive coaching program, all about identity and like your self-talk. Because at your core, even if you're doing everything right, you've got everything aligned to have the perfect plan, if you do not believe you can achieve the result, you will always self-sabotage. So if just getting some results is going to actually be a tool that can help you to build that self-belief, then hey, that's great. But obviously the most important thing that we're here for is, how do I use it then in a way that makes me feel in control so I'm not dependent on it? Because the goal isn't to stay on it forever, right? I don't think anyone signs up or pays or, you know, gets a prescription for a GLP-1 thinking, I want this for the rest of my life. You don't, right? You want it as a tool to get you to where you want to be. So what needs to happen, in my opinion, outside of, again, this is my opinion, but for what it's worth, I've helped a lot of people to remove food noise, feel in control with food, without GLP-1s, and I've also supported people to come off GLP-1s or use them to achieve this result. So this is all backed by actual results. So the first thing that I believe needs to happen is, if you are using it, so this is for someone that is using it, is to come off it gently. So do not do the cold turkey method, right? Obviously you've got the dosages and you can go up and down, but coming down, and when you're coming down, spending a lot of time reconnecting with hunger and fullness signals. So if you're very much suppressed, you might be having quite small meals, this, that, and the other, and then obviously hunger and fullness comes back and it can feel quite chaotic. But spending time between coming down the dosages, working on understanding your hunger, your fullness, satiety signals, what's emotional hunger, what's physical hunger, and really spending time doing that, so that when you're completely off it, you can be really in tune with that properly, because you haven't got that suppression in your system. The next, and probably one of the biggest things, is to work on emotional regulation while doing it. Because I would say, for, again, this is a number thrown out of my head here, 70, 80%, maybe more, of the struggles a lot of ADHD people have when it comes to their weight is around emotions. Negative, strong emotional swings, dopamine chasing, and it's that drives the overeating over the actual appetite. So if this drug is just purely suppressing appetite, then it isn't working on managing and regulating those emotions. So you need to understand, like, your triggers, like, why do you turn to food for comfort? Where do you do it? And start to build some tools and strategies to either, so it's either prevention or cure when it comes to emotional regulation. We either need to look at what's driving those negative emotions in your life, those struggles and challenges. Can we work on that? So it could be stress management, it could be boundaries, it could be, you know, removing certain things, changing parts of your life. This is a lot of the work we do with clients. Or if it's something that's unchangeable, so let's say you struggle a lot with, maybe it's the stress of your job, and obviously right now you can't change that, well, it's then how do we deal with that stress, or what can we do instead? Maybe on a night, you know, you've got quite a lot of free time, like me, you live on your own, you're bored, right? What can we do to fill that boredom? So it's working on these little strategies so that when, again, the appetite is elevated, remember that it's not just about the appetite, it's the emotions too. The next thing is to have a structure. Like, one of the worst things I see when I've seen these, like, what I eat in a day on Mounjaro, GLP-1s, is people don't have any sort of eating structure. It's very, today I wasn't that hungry, so I didn't eat till like 2 p.m. Some days one meal, some days it's just snacks, not meals. And again, if that's going to get you the result, all good. But obviously what happens is when then you start to come off the drug and you're actually hungry, and it's like, when do I eat? What do I eat? Whereas something that can massively help food noise and remove decision fatigue, which are, you know, two struggles with ADHD and weight loss, is a regular structured eating pattern. So my clients that are on a GLP-1, I think, right, so when we come off this, when are we roughly going to be eating? So maybe you're going to have breakfast before work, lunch at work, maybe an afternoon snack around 4 or 5 p.m, dinner at 7, and maybe something in the evening, right? So we're going to stick to that as close as possible, so then we're used to that regular structure. And even if it means we're having smaller things in that time frame, doesn't matter, we're just getting used to that structure. Because if you're going from like one meal a day, but then you're hungry and all this like then mental chaos goes in, that's when you're more likely to overeat, because it just feels so chaotic. And alongside that, building in habits, because it's the things that are going to support weight loss and weight maintenance, which are usually the things you're probably not going to want to do when your appetite is low. So I compare this to when I've obviously not used the GLP-1, but I compare the appetite suppression to maybe when I've been really poorly, really ill, and I've had like no appetite, which is not like me because I like my food. And that is, for me, I just want to eat beige, carby, nice things. I'm not asked about protein or fruit or veg or anything like that. And that's a common pattern that I tend to see with people on GLP-1s. It's very beige, plainish foods because they're not really bothered about like loads of fiber, and you know, that kind of makes them even more full, which is understandable. But you still want to build these habits in. So like I've got a client at the moment who is feeling really full from her, she's on a GLP-1 at the moment. And you know, in the past she'd have these massive portions of like chicken and beef and loads of fruit and veg, and she's like, I can't face it. And it's like, well, that's fine, but let's still keep the habit of building our meals around protein. So even if it's just a couple of slices of ham, a tiny few cubes of chicken, half an apple, right? 3 grapes, it doesn't matter what it is, but we just get used to doing that. And obviously when your appetite comes up, you can add more of this. But the reality is increasing the quantities of these foods are not going to massively make you gain weight. So what I mean by this is if you know, let's say you're having like a few cubes of chicken because your appetite's low, and then you go to make that meal again in a few months' time when you've come off it, you might have double, triple the amount of chicken, but that's not going to add crazy amounts of calories, but you're so used to building that habit in. And then the final thing is something, well, it's linked from psychology, which is this idea of like exposure and building trust. So a lot of people, what I find when they're using a GLP-1 is they're like, oh, well, you know, chocolate was my kryptonite, crisps my kryptonite, so now I don't need to have them, and this is great and it feels good, which understandable. But when you then come off it and those cravings are back, what's going to happen? Because you've not had it for so long, you are going to want to eat all of it that you can get your hands on, and that's not going to be good for you. So my suggestion is something that we call like exposure, right? So while you've got the capacity to feel in control, because a lot of ADHDers feel all or nothing about these kind of foods, right? It's one pack of biscuits or no biscuits. It's not a couple. It's the whole share bar of dairy milk or nothing. It's not a few cubes. But while your appetite suppression is lower, this is the time to actually show your brain that you can have a little bit of it. So the foods that you feel are trigger foods, have them in moderation and do it a lot, so that when you're coming off that drug, you're now used to having a few cubes of chocolate and being fine, 2 biscuits and being fine. You've removed that like mental narrative that it's either all of it or none of it, and that worked beautifully. And those are the best ways that you can, if you choose to use it and think it's the right approach for you, use it in a way so that when you do choose to come off it, you can either maintain those results or keep going with it. So I hope that has been helpful and valuable, and if you do have any questions on this, either drop me a message on my socials, which I will leave, or you can comment below and I'll get back to everyone. But just something as well to drop it in, supporting clients who are on or coming off GLP-1s with ADHD is something that I actually do quite a lot. I would say quite a high percentage of my clients over the last sort of few months, my newer clients have been in this boat. So it's something that I have a lot of expertise and can support you with. So if you are looking for someone who gets it, who isn't going to judge you for using it, judge you for your ADHD isms, and who can help you to come off it and sustain the results, I will also leave the application form for my one-to-one coaching in the show notes as well. And obviously, depending on when you are watching this will depend if I have spaces or whether I'm at a wait list, but obviously you can go still inquire. Anyway, other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day, beautiful humans, and I will speak to you very soon.